As the storm approached, Donald and Kimberly Stokes hunkered down here at the back of the house in their bathroom. They were covering over their dogs. The tornado sent them airborne. They landed way over there in the middle of the street. After all the pomp and circumstance is over, some Louisiana students may choose to pack their bags, load the car, and head out of state, maybe for a new job. However, if you're a top student under one state lawmaker's bill, that move could come with a pretty big price tag. We're about a quarter mile or so from the river, and as you can see, it is taking over this campground and the area around it, at least ankle-deep water, though it is deeper in some spots. Scalise's office says he's in critical condition tonight after being shot in the hip earlier this morning. Now, the gunman's social media accounts suggest that politics may have played a role in inspiring him to open fire. Early this morning, the president sounded off on Twitter, accusing the mayor of San Juan of poor leadership and saying the Puerto Ricans just want everything done for them. This container we're standing in at the Santa Ana Fire Department used to hold about 30,000 of these sandbags. As you can see, it's now empty. Now, this storm by no means is supposed to bring the flooding that we saw back in August, but the folks here say they're not willing to risk it. Collins says he was at work when the UPS driver first arrived on his porch. Almost immediately, his security camera sent a notification to his phone. Lawmakers are each paid $157 a day, which doesn't sound like a lot. But when you consider there are more than 140 legislators and the session lasted 25 days, that begins to add up, with the state paying out $571,000. I am live right now amongst a scary pack of tigers. We are live along the parade route right now. We're, of course, a little less than an hour away from kickoff time, and I'm here with Peggy. You are in charge of this float, so why the tiger theme?
The front window of the house, it was about 3 inches below the windows.
High water trucks and boats are the only ways to get to the home of Zach Beasley. He and his girlfriend lived here for just 7 months before Irma's rain caused the Horse Creek to rise.
Everything we have is gone. I mean, it's sad. This was our home, our only place.
Here at the house, the water is just over ankle deep, but this is not the worst of it. Zach and his family telling me at one point the water was nearly as high as this wall. Inside, murky water coats the floors. Tadpoles and other animals now claim the house as their own.
Everything is gone. We're still making payments on this stuff.
They were able to salvage some things, including Zach's diabetic supplies.
You know, it's hard. What are you supposed to grab?
Zach's girlfriend, Kiara Aiken, rides horses. They evacuated them to safety before the waters rose. Where are you looking to go next?
Honestly, we don't know. I mean, I've just been reaching out to people on Facebook, people I know, friends with horses, land, you know, seeing if I can keep my horses with them just until we get situated and find a new place. And that new place could be not just out of town, but out of state. They already flooded during Harvey just 2 weeks ago.
We can't afford to start over 20 times. I mean, once or twice, okay, but every time it rains, we can't afford to do it.
Good morning to you, Matt. And last report, Representative Steve Scalise remains in critical condition this morning. The hospital saying that he will likely have to undergo additional operations. We're also learning this morning a little bit more about that shot. That bullet went through his hip, fractured bones, injuring internal organs, and causing what they described as severe bleeding. He needed to receive additional units of blood transfusions. Now, President Donald Trump visited Scalise in the hospital last night. He tweeted out after that meeting that Scalise was in a pretty tough spot. Now, as for the exact motive in this case, it still remains somewhat unclear. Investigators are combing through the gunman's history on Facebook and online. He repeatedly posted anti-Trump rhetoric on the social messaging site. Now, I spoke with Louisiana lawmakers about the reaction to this shooting. At a time of partisan division, they pushed for unity.
It absolutely needs to be something that we learn from. Look, the bond that we share as Americans is much greater than the politics we may disagree with. And we have got to base everything upon that foundation of being Americans first.
We have to consider each other first as children of God, second as Americans, and work to both serve our country and to serve each other. We may disagree. We may have to agree to disagree, but that does not excuse violence.
Now, as I was talking to Senator Bill Cassidy, who you just heard there yesterday, he told me that it is key that lawmakers get back to work doing the people's business. Otherwise, he says, the gunman has won in this case. And another sign of that resiliency, as you mentioned at the top there, Matt, that game, that charity baseball game scheduled to still go on at Nationals Ballpark just across town a little later today. We'll have more on that coming up in the next half hour. For now, though, reporting in our nation's capital, I'm Kevin Frey, WAFB 9 News. Young or old, being pulled over by police while on the road can be a nerve-wracking experience. Just ask Senator Ryan Gaddy.
I put my hands at 9 and 3 o'clock. I had my paperwork ready. And, here I am, a new state senator, and I had so much anxiety I was starting to sweat a little bit.
Now the Republican from Bossier City is pushing a bill aimed at easing the anxiety. His solution? Train new drivers on what to do when they are stopped by law enforcement on the side of the road. The bill makes those best practices part of driver's ed.
The officers have a plethora of training. How to stand, to turn on their camera, to do the different things at a traffic stop. What we found is that the other side of the coin did not have a lot of training.
The goal, he says, is to ensure safe, peaceful interactions between the officer and the driver. The same goes for a bill by Baton Rouge Democrat Edmund Jordan, changing how cops act during those traffic stops. When you get pulled over, you have to get out proof of insurance. Oftentimes that means reaching into your glove box. However, that sort of movement can make an otherwise normal interaction suddenly very tense.
The officer doesn't know if he's reaching for what he's asked for, but if he's reaching for a weapon. His hands aren't able to be seen. The driver has some of those same apprehensions and fears.
Jordan's bill requires officers to search an electronic database to check if the driver has insurance, even before approaching the car. If the vehicle does not come up on that database, the officer can then ask to see the insurance card.
This, to me, really is just a public safety issue.
At the Capitol, Kevin Frey, WAFB 9 News.
There you go.
With a hammer and some elbow grease,
All this is mortars and tenons.
Theodric Givens can match wits with any carpenter. His latest project, a dining room table set for a couple who flooded last August.
They came, they wanted to buy, but they didn't really have the funds. So I turned around and told them, I said, well, look, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a dinette set.
But unlike most living in the Baton Rouge area, Givens never saw those floodwaters firsthand.
I've been confined 41 years, 7 months, and 1 day.
Convicted of second-degree murder in New Orleans in 1976, he's now in his 60s. He has so far spent 2/3 of his life at Angola prison.
I done lost all my hair. Look at that. I don't have no hair on top of my head.
During those decades, Givens learned a trade, rebuilding his life one project at a time.
I look at where I come from, and I know I'm still not where I would like to be. But I'm satisfied at the progress. I'm happy with me.
Sentenced to life, he was destined to live the rest of his years behind bars. But as of just a few weeks ago, he now has a chance at freedom.
We have the district attorneys on board. We have the sheriffs on board.
Earlier this year, in a rare moment of bipartisanship, state lawmakers approved 10 bills overhauling Louisiana's criminal justice system. Part of that reform, a chance at parole for about 130 lifers convicted in the 1970s, including Givens. When they were first sentenced, they were promised a shot at parole, but a technicality in the law prevented them from acting on it. Now they'll get that chance.
This is not an automatic release. This has to go through a process, and the victims and the DAs, everybody will have their say-so.
Hello again from Havana. The deals signed today are by no means official trade agreements. The embargo prevents that, but Louisiana leaders say they are a step in the right direction. Louisiana and Cuban leaders put pen to paper this morning, signing agreements affirming relations between the state and the island nation. Largely symbolic, the memorandums of understanding, as they're called, are designed to increase communication and allow for the sharing of ideas going forward.
We appreciate this visit as a positive sign of the will of many Americans to participate directly.
State leaders, including Commissioner of Agriculture Mike Strain, hope the deals will also give Louisiana a leg up if and when the embargo is lifted and trade with the island nation is expanded.
We are perfectly poised to be the predominant player in these markets.
Next year, Cuba is expected to import about $2 billion worth of agricultural products like rice and soybeans, items that are Louisiana's specialty.
In the United States, with American goods, within 5 years, if we can normalize trade relationships, we could have $1 billion of that. We fully expect Louisiana to have a lion's share of that.
Even with the embargo in place, Louisiana has been allowed limited trade with Cuba for items deemed necessary for humanitarian reasons. But that trade has waned in recent years as Cuba's economy struggled, cutting back on their ability to pay. Looking around Havana, it's hard to miss the extreme poverty, in some cases just a block from major tourist hubs like this park. Strain says because of all this, the embargo should be lifted sooner rather than later.
We have to renormalize these negotiations so that we can trade just like with any other country.
But any chance of that could still be a long way off. Coming up tomorrow, the Louisiana group on the ground here in Havana will be visiting a port that is currently being expanded in order to entice more trade to the island. We'll have updates for you along the way. For now, though, reporting in Havana for the Raycom News Network, I'm Kevin Frey. Well, without a doubt, the biggest cheer of the night was not for a football player or a play, but a congressman. Take a listen. Steve Scalise getting a big hug from Coach O. The congressman returned home to Louisiana for the first time since being shot at a baseball practice outside D.C. back in June. Later, Scalise stood shoulder to shoulder next to LSU President F. King Alexander during the national anthem. Earlier today, the congressman tweeted out this picture of him and his wife going to the polls in Jefferson Parish. Now, the reason is because today was the first day of early voting across Louisiana ahead of the October 14th election. Polls will be open all week through next Saturday from 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. with the exception of tomorrow. Topping the ballot is the race for the Treasurer's office. Candidates are vying to replace former Treasurer and now Senator John Kennedy. Now, before you head to the polls, be sure to check out the 9 News app. There you'll find information about polling locations along with a breakdown of those 3 constitutional amendments up for a vote. A person is in the hospital tonight after being involved in an accident with a Baton Rouge police cruiser. This is what it looked like near the intersection of Blunt Road and Scenic Highway. A spokesman for BRPD says the accident happened around 8 this evening. He says the officer sustained minor injuries but is okay. The other driver's vehicle apparently flipped and was on fire for a time. Police say that driver sustained moderate injuries but is expected to survive. A 9 News update now on the controversy surrounding Baton Rouge's now former second-in-command, Chief Administrative Officer Troy Bell, resigned his post yesterday after less than a week on the job. Bell is accused of lying on his resume about a master's degree in public administration. Today, 9 News spoke to Mayor Sharon Westenbroom, who appointed him to the post after a months-long search. Here's what she told us. Overnight, detectives were on the scene of another deadly shooting in Baton Rouge. This is what it looked like last night around 10 o'clock on Laurel Street near North 26th Street. That's where Baton Rouge police say 21-year-old Anthony Campbell was found dead from apparent gunshot wounds. Detectives have not said what led up to the deadly scene or whether they have any suspects in mind. If you know anything that may be able to help those investigators, call Crime Stoppers at 344-STOP. Developing news now, the Iberville Parish Sheriff's Office is investigating after the body of a young woman was found in Whiskey Bay. Sheriff Brett Stassi says a fisherman discovered the body earlier today under I-10 between mile marker 130 and 131. They are treating it as a homicide. The woman is described as white, likely between age 25 and 35. An autopsy is scheduled for Monday.